Hey everybody, welcome back to Black Lotus Live, where we talk about all things strange and unusual. And tonight we have a guest panelist with us, and her name is Laurie McDonald. And she is a hypnotherapist that specializes in people who claim to have alien I can't speak, alien abductions. But first, let me get some business out of the way. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And we love to see a big thumbs up. And also, we haven't been able to monetize yet on YouTube. So we have a couple of links that I want to direct you to in the description at the bottom. And one of the links is buy me a coffee. And you can donate whatever you like, but I think the minimum is like $5. So yeah, $5, everything helps. So please do. We also have a page at Patron where you can join for only $5. And for that, you get extra content. So, and we do that every Sunday after this show. So anyway, let me introduce everybody. Ralph could not join us tonight. He has some health issues. Michael couldn't join us because I guess his family's going back down to Florida and he wanted to spend some time with them before they leave. And to my side, I've got my lovely wife, Terry. And then we have our resident field biologist, Wild Trees, and of course, Kimberly O'Connor. And as I mentioned, we have Laurie McDonald tonight. So let's get this party started. Okay, I think the first thing I want to talk about is I was talking to a gentleman today by the name of Tony Rodriguez. And he claims to have been abducted when he was 9 years old. And he was taken into the, what is it called? The super space program, where he was basically made into a slave for 20 years. And then after the 20 years was up, he was transported back to when he was 9 years old again. And he said that he was a totally changed person. And he didn't know why, because he didn't remember any of this. And anyway, he's going to be on our Paranormal News Network podcast next week. And I'm really anxious to talk to this guy because this guy's story sounds completely believable, you know. But I wonder how many people are abducted by aliens and put into this program and we just don't remember it. Any thoughts?
Well, you know, first off, there's about 200 million people worldwide who have reported either face-to-face or eye-to-eye contact with a non-human entity or seen a UFO, and that's reported to a formal organization. So when we're looking at numbers, you know, what could that be? Could there be more? Then there's definitely that possibility. Any of the places where I speak, I'll often ask the audience who here has actually reported. Very few people actually raise their hands. So the numbers are always hard to call because a lot of people aren't comfortable coming forward. But children, I think it's the secret space program is what you might be referring to. And there have been people who claim to have been taken into this. I'm not so sure about the slave part. I'd love to hear more about what he had to say about that. What I'm interested in is being in there for 20 years and then coming back to what the mentality or the body consciousness of a 9-year-old without recollection. What are we timeline shifting here? Parallel universe?
Yeah, apparently it's a time travel thing. And what they do is they take you, and it's a standard abduction scene. But then they transported him to the moon and Mars and eventually Sirius, where he spent the majority of his time. And so, yeah, I mean, he seems like a very legitimate guy. but yeah, and evidently it's a military program.
Yeah, it
And
sounds like a military laboratory experience where the military is often involved in abductions. Of course, depending on who the abductors are and what the specific agenda is. If we know the race of the entity, then we have a pretty good idea of what their agenda is. Gives us a psychological edge in understanding how to communicate, or more precisely, how to behave, so that we can stay within our power to actually form or create some type of communication, as opposed to what we see in the majority of the older cases where people are taken against their will, subjected to either biological experiments with the extraction of DNA, either ovum or sperm, other forms of tissue too, for a hybridization program. This was very apparent in the 80s and in the 90s. Now, these women who are older, who have more experience, have become more empowered, have expanded their reality, their consciousness, their understanding, maybe even have tapped into the multidimensional aspect of the human soul. These women want their babies back, or at least have some form of communication, because the emotional aspect of the human can, pass both space and time. This is not something that is going to be cut off. So it's really always, who are the players? Once we know who the players are, we can do a little psychological profiling on the said entity, look at the experiencer, and then we want to address the experiencer like a witness to a crime or to an event, and we want to debrief them in a way that allows them to express their truth. But then we'll move into, say, a regression. We always like to use an EEG so that we can monitor the brain waves of the subject, so that we can determine what level of consciousness they're communicating in. You can't create a face in the subconscious, in the alpha brain. It's not its function. It's like a hard drive on the computer. It stores your information. The neural pathway to behavior manifested in our third dimensional reality is really based on the emotional impact. So you see some people who have issues, trauma around the abduction, then they're going to be easily triggered because that neural pathway is sort of a live wire still. And so it'll continue coming up until it's addressed. But once we address it, and we are in the alpha, little of the delta brainwave, and a person's able to gain a higher perspective, almost a 360-degree view, because we're now utilizing senses outside of our regular senses, because we're moving into the subconscious mind as if we're an explorer. We're doing an exploration to retrieve specific information. And, the 1,000+ cases that I've done, the majority of the people, I would say, are legitimate experiencers. Doesn't always necessarily mean that their experience was extraterrestrial. It could have been paranormal, interdimensional, and involve other laws of physics that the experience falls within. So timeline, dimensional shifting, interdimensional entities, more shadow beings, that's your more paranormal aspect. And when we see a manifested sentient being and or a light manifestation in the silhouette of a human, more falling under the lines of extraterrestrial. But one of the most important questions I've always found is why, the experiencer is always, why me? What is it about me? But it's not just them in particular, it's their bloodline or their family lineage. But on top of that, it's really, why the humans? Why are all of these different dimensions or extraterrestrials interested in us? What is it about us that makes us outstanding in the multiverse that they would come and take genetics from us? And I think we now know the answer to that. And upon understanding the deeper and the higher minded answer of this, we move forward more empowered, more capable of dealing with the whole phenomena as a whole. And the thing is really understanding the human. And, you know, for the listeners who don't know, human is actually a definition by nature of the type of entity that we are. It doesn't mean people. Human, hue is a light. I mean, it's the word we use to measure the saturation or depth of light. We measure that in hues. Man comes from the word manifestation, to come into the physical or to be embodied. A human is a light embodied being. And so when you begin to understand the type of entity that we are, understanding the multidimensional aspects of what that implies, then you have to understand that there are certain extraterrestrial races that would be envious of that internal light, which implies a continuous energy of changing from one form to another, which is what we have that very unique ability to do. Whereas many of the abductor races live between 900 to 1100 years, and they die unless they're like maybe the short grays, which are programmed hive-like consciousness that are limited in their ability and don't have free thinking. They're just following a program.
I think it's important. I'm a complete believer in this hybridization program. Kimberly, you have an experience with that. You want to expound upon that?
As far as the child,
Mm-hmm.
I've got at least one that I've been shown personally as being a hybrid.
Wow. Do you know, was it a female or male?
Female.
What does she look like?
Her eyes are a little bit bigger than ours, but not quite as big as what a gray's would be. And she had fair skin, which I'm fair skinned to start with because I'm half Irish and half Scandinavian or Swedish.
Mm.
And she doesn't look completely. I mean, at first I thought I was dealing with the tall grays. I'm not dealing with the tall grays. It looked like a mix actually between tall grays and Arcturians.
Is her hair wispy, fine?
No.
What does her hair look like to you?
She just had dark colored hair. She didn't have the blonde, the natural blonde like everybody has explained.
Yeah, we don't actually, that's not always the case. It's actually seldom the case.
That everybody has used. And that's not the case in this one.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Is her hair more like yours?
Sorry.
Yeah, but not as the I would say the strands of hair is not as thick as what a brunette's or somebody with darker hair would be. It would be a little, I would say, yes, a little bit finer, but not wispy.
Right. Wow. What an incredible opportunity to have a hybrid child introduced. Now, did you sense that the child was yours, or did they tell you that it was yours?
They didn't have to tell me. I knew. I could tell.
You did.
When they brought her in, there was like four beings, and they brought her into a room, and I automatically knew. They don't speak. Everything's telepathic.
That's right. Yeah. Wow. How incredible. Do you know where she is?
No, I don't.
Do you know why they need her?
From what I understand, is that we're being used for repopulation and population of other planets and stars. We're basically incubators.
Wow. That's very interesting.
Kimberly, have you ever done a regression, hypnotherapy regression?
I've done spirit writing, which I do, but as far as a professional one, no.
Excuse me, I haven't either, and I don't know that I want to do it. And the reason being is because
talking to you about the examinations and stuff. That's something that I don't recall other than the one time, and I don't remember ever feeling anything during an examination. And I think that because of that, I think that that's why I feel that I've had I consider myself having a good experience,
Mhm,
rather
mhm.
than had I experienced pain or anything like that during an exam. I think that maybe I would think other. But, we have no control over this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, well,
We
I
actually
wonder,
do
I wonder
have
how
some
much control
control.
we actually have.
We have
I mean,
control. I
but
have to say we do. I find that after a person moves through separate forms of regression sessions, they become more empowered. They're more capable of utilizing their personal energy to either extrapolate further information around it or to block further interaction. It is our free will, it is our choice. A lot of the abductor races are very well aware that it is a violation of our human rights for them to do that. So maybe they'll tell you you've created a contract or that you have former knowledge and agreed to do this, or
I
they'll
think
take
that's done
us
prior
in a
before
dream
coming here.
state. Sorry?
I said I believe that's done prior to coming here, because I believe that it starts in an infant stage, that we're conditioned to being used to them. That's why a lot of us are less fearful of them.
Right. Yeah.
right.
We shouldn't be afraid. There's nothing to fear at all. Really, I think the approach that I'm really trying to point out is that it is a choice. It's a free will. But when they are conditioned at a young age, you become compliant. And when you're compliant in the law, then you're agreeing without agreeing. You're agreeing by becoming compliant. Until you expressly say either yes or no, you have to give permission in these cases. And if it's not asked, there's a form or a very strong possibility that there's a form of manipulation happening. It's not always the case, but there are universal laws that have to be followed.
But not, it's according to what species you're also talking about as well, because every one of them, there's so many different species, and each one of them has their own agenda. They don't all work under the same agenda.
No, we have about 6 abductor races that we know of, and then multiple other forms of entities, including hybrids. And then we have the light entities that never come into a full form. And you're going to find them, the Virgo cluster way out in deep space. There's this long arm of space that stretches out. There is where the higher entities reside. So it's a complicated subject. It's, conceptualized ideas of good and bad don't apply. These are human concepts, human ways of thinking, and that we need to really expand upon that to speak their language. Otherwise, we're falling under terms of good and bad, and really it's not that. There's particular races, higher frequency races, ones that will allow you to encompass higher frequency emotions like compassion, mercy, real pity, and understanding. They always ask your permission. They ask, do you want to be? They do that in a conscious state so that you can make a conscious decision as a human. It's extraordinarily complicated and interesting. And yeah, not many of the cases are identical, but we researchers have a compilation of many cases, 1,000 for me, and we put them into specific categories so we can see the true agenda or the agenda orientation or the manipulation of the humans. And we've been manipulated before. We give our power away to anything that looks magical, godlike, or angelic.
Humans are manipulative as the same as well.
I'm not sure how we manipulate extraterrestrials, but of course.
No, I'm talking about our own race. We manipulate. Sure. That's common. I mean, even to tell a human, basically even within religious sects, that there's like guidelines, and I feel if you don't follow those guidelines, then and many times you feel like you don't have a voice.
Yeah,
Laurie,
we're manipulated all the time. You're absolutely right. And it's a very sad thing because really our goal here should be creating a specific ascension in empowering each other and allowing a person to choose and to believe what they want. What I believe, nobody else has to. It doesn't take anything away from that. I don't have to feel inferior or superior. The idea is, and a truly empowered person is gaining information, sharing it without, because right now everything is speculation until we can definitively answer a lot of the questions. We can look at the research and we can see the commonalities and what they indicate, and we can project what we think the next step is. And we can put those pieces together and begin to understand. But yeah, humans, and until we reach that human attainment, till we become the best humans that we can be, then we are going to continuously harm each other. And that's why we're not really moving in the right direction as far as the ascension.
And I also feel that those that haven't had the experience, it's a little bit more difficult to understand than those that have.
Well, it's that seeing is believing thing that happens quite a bit. I'm a lifelong experiencer. My mother was an experiencer. And, I've facilitated some of the largest experiencer groups all over the world. I've talked to experiencers in the depths of the jungles in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in Geneva, Switzerland, all over China. And it's very interesting to see the way different people express their experience and what makes somebody believe and what makes somebody not believe. And it's personal and cultural.
Laurie, the last time we spoke was on our podcast, and that was a couple of years ago. And back then I told you about my experience, and I told you that it was a relatively pleasant experience. I found it more interesting than anything. But there was a point in my memory of the experience where I was on the operating table, and the alien that was the gray that was up near my head put her hand on it, and I blacked. I couldn't remember anything that had happened. Well, now about a year ago, my wife and Ralph and I were sitting in the living room, and we were watching this movie called The Fourth Kind. And in that is a scene where, it's a recalling of an alien abduction. And one of the aliens puts a needle toward the experiencer's eye. And I flipped out. It triggered me. And I remembered everything that happened on that operating table, and it was absolutely horrible. Now, since then, I've developed PTSD. I can't sleep through the night. I often wake up screaming, and God bless my wife, who understands and puts up with it. But what I want to know is, how many people have you dealt with? And to be honest with you, I don't feel any animosity toward the aliens that did this. I really don't. I've come to terms with the fact that what they did with me is no different than what our own scientists would do with a lab rat. So, but that doesn't quell my fears and my anxiety about all of this. How many people have you dealt with the same problem?
Okay, what you're referring to is not PTSD. What you're referring to is post-abduction stress disorder. That's PAST. That was coined about 15, 17 years ago by Rose Harsgrove. She was a psychological student, then went into nursing and into psychiatry. And anyway, yeah, a lot of people have that. We have a list of commonalities with certain experiencers who tend to all of a sudden become afraid of the dark. All of a sudden can't seem to sleep. Sometimes their senses may be heightened or peaked, and they can feel into an area. And so there's this underlying energy that doesn't allow you to sort of settle in, settle down, be at ease in your own mind and in your own body. And there is the violation of the harm that they create. Unintentional, perhaps, but anyone that creates harm within our energy field is hurting us. And so that, again, not good or bad, just is. We have to be aware of that as we move forward. So there are many, many people. Now, it does sound like a gray experience that, and I'm trying to believe that's how I recall it. I've so many cases, but with the post-abduction stress disorder, it is quite common if you have any interaction with a reptilian, a tall gray or a short gray. And of course, remembering that among the grays, there are more than one type of gray. And I just don't mean small and tall. They have created gray hybrids with many other types of races. And even some race of gray are more rogue and have begun to sympathize, I guess you could say, and try to break away from the main agenda of the grays. So the grays, are misunderstood to a certain degree, but at the same time, don't ever think for a minute that they are capable of feeling some of those higher frequency emotions. The grays will always keep you in a third dimensional reality. That's the best for them. That is what they're striving for. Other extraterrestrials will bring you to an awareness of, say, fourth dimensional consciousness, thinking and understanding, allowing you to see the development of the human as we ascend into a fifth. That's the natural process of a spiritual growth. And all of these experiences, paranormal, meganormal, extraterrestrial, interdimensional, it doesn't matter. Each and every one of them give us an opportunity to learn about ourselves, to use it as a spiritual catalyst in understanding our place in this world and among the cosmos. There is a difference between our fate and our destinies. The circumstances of our life, the things that happen to us, this is our fate. It is not who we are or a representation of what we are. We each and every one of us have a destiny to fulfill on our way to human attainment. This is a natural process of the human soul. And so certain extraterrestrials are trying to bypass that, preventing us from moving into the fourth dimensional consciousness thinking and looping us back into a third dimensional reality because it serves their purpose. And that's how you want to differentiate between what extraterrestrials you want to have a relationship with. If they're self-serving, then they're self-serving, that's self-explanatory, move on. If they have a mutual respect and understanding and they're using permissive languaging and they're asking if you're willing to do this and not telling you, oh, you agreed to this in a past life. You know what? If I don't remember, I can't be held to it. So this is why conscious understanding and conscious communication is what we need. That way, there's no opportunity for anything to be ambiguous.
Let me interrupt you here. Let me break in here. Offworld Adam says that he was applying to be a mod here and never heard back. Offworld, do me a favor, send me an email at blacklotuspodcast@gmail.com and I'll set you up for that. I have a lot of respect for you. So, Wild, where are you at in all this?
Yeah, okay. Well, I've been writing some notes here. So let me talk about my thoughts on the subject. Well, first of all, Laurie, nice to meet you, and thank you for being here.
Very nice to meet you as well.
I've been enjoying you talk about your work. Okay, well, I guess one little point is that I think it's really interesting what a good job these abductors are doing at covering their crime. I do think, I'm not saying it's morally correct. Some laws are moral, some laws are immoral. But by definition, if somebody's abducting you from your house and you don't have a consent, that's a crime. And what's really cool about them is they're really good at that crime because the majority of humans will just laugh at the idea that there's even a crime happening. So imagine if I was like a bank robber. I was robbing banks all the time. And whenever somebody brought up the fact that, hey, maybe Wild Trees is a bank robber, everybody just laughs. Like, no way. Police laugh, judges laugh. Everybody laughs. There's no way. That's a great way to get away with a crime. So they're doing a good job of keeping this going, because the majority of us just ridicule the idea. I think there's a lesson there too. There's a lesson there about not dismissing something just because of the ridiculousness of the claim, because that could be something that could be exploited, which I think it is being exploited. The other thing is that your initial question you asked about was the secret space program. So I've heard the idea been thrown around as well. So I'll give what I think is people are saying. People are saying that they are basically being kidnapped. They are being made to work, do physical labor for decades, and then they are brought back to their body at a earlier time. So it's like they did live that time, but in their physical life, that time was not like, they're not 50 years older. They're just back at where they started from.
Right. Like, for instance, Tony Rodriguez says that he went back to his 9-year-old body, and it was like 15 minutes later.
Right. Exactly.
So
I have a explanation for that later. Just carry on, though.
So I think that's, first of all, the first time I heard it, and I'm kind of like, wow, that's ridiculous. That's crazy. That's one of the craziest stories I've heard. But I mean, my other attitude is like, I have to give everything attention, because if I, for instance, I do believe that there's very intelligent non-humans on this planet manipulating us. If I just believe that one thing, then really, I mean, what else is impossible? With that one core belief I have opens the door to all kinds of things. Now, something that not an issue, but a question I have about the secret space program is this. Okay, so it looks like non-humans use us for a variety of reasons. I totally understand using us for our genetic material, as far as using us for hybrids because their genetic material is too weak or just not enough, so they use us to produce offspring. That makes sense, as a biologist especially. But what this secret space program is saying is that they're using us for physical labor, which brings the question to me. I'm like, okay, do they not have the technology to make androids? I mean, apparently the Greys are androids. Is it not like, what is the benefit? What is the benefit of using a human to do physical labor as opposed to just making a machine that could do physical labor? That is one question. I'm not saying it's not true, but I'm saying what's going on in their minds that they're thinking that, they have all this technology. Why use humans for physical labor? Why not just make a machine?
That's definitely a question I'm going to ask him.
Are you guys familiar with Psychotronics?
Okay.
No,
I'm not.
I'm
No.
Psychotronics are along the lines of the technology like voice to skull communication. Familiar with that? V2 skull. Okay, these are forms of technology where our military has the ability to tune into, say, Wild Trees' energetic fingerprint.
Okay.
You can insert a memory into that and make you feel on every level as if you experienced that. And so you could experience 10 years, 15 to 20 years. It wouldn't matter.
Right.
Only a short amount of time can go by. So psychotronics are actually incredible because it can really be used and should be used for healing.
Okay.
But we use these to manipulate people and to manipulate brainwaves. We learned some of that delta brainwave technology from the tall whites. This came through the Eisenhower administration. So inserting a memory is no big deal. But I'll tell you, several years ago, I was researching psychotronics, and it was like 2:00 in the morning, and I was in the upstairs office, and it was really quiet. I'm in like a really super old house, and I'm typing, and all of a sudden I hear really loud in my head, "You have no business researching psychotronics." And literally my hands like levitated over the keyboard, and I stopped for a moment, shook it off like, what? Continued working. And then they said something else, which was very self-defeating. And I remember like closing my laptop, walking down the long hall to my bedroom. By the time I sat on my bed, I went, not in a million years would I think that. And what had happened was, as I was researching Psychotronic, I became a victim of receiving one of those messages that they can send to you, and you hear it in your head, and it's like a form of clairaudience, except that it's all done through the manipulation of energy and brain waves. And so they can make you think, see, feel, whatever you want. The reptilians in particular are totally into psychological testing as opposed to the genetics, like the Greys. So they're doing all forms of psychological testing in fear. They're highly heightened around our sexuality and will often even be seen in a room during an intimate act to observe. But I'm not really sure if observation is accurate, because to me, it feels more like they're feeding on the energy. And that's kind of vampiric in nature. And the reptilians, also can use some of these brain wave technologies. Psychotronics has been around for a long time. The American government used it on the Iraqs. And in fact, they told a group that they were in combat with, they used technology on them, told them, we are God, I am God, put your weapon down. They dropped their weapons, they came out, they fell to the ground, they surrendered. It wasn't God. It was generally enlisted men. And so these technologies work, and we have to be very careful as to what is real and what is not real, what is true and what is not true. People are easily tricked because we're young and naive and innocent. We're in the kindergarten of the cosmos here. Our foot is through the door. This is true. But just on a second, on the burden of proof, people not being comfortable expressing their experiences, that's shifted dramatically since the Pentagon released the Navy chasing the TikTok UFOs. Once the Pentagon said, yeah, these are UFOs, what that does is it sort of lifts the burden of proof from the experiencer. They're not out there alone trying to say, this is true. We now have some footage that's being provided by a government agency where they're saying that these are unidentified. Well, they're saying, unidentified aerial phenomena. And I think that the reason that the verbiage is changed is very important, and that's going to be very apparent over the next few years as we move out of a soft disclosure into something a little harder.
I agree. I completely agree. I think that going forward with this information in mind, the government is going to be, their hand is going to be forced by the public to reveal what they truly know about all of this stuff, and my hope is that they'll come clean about working with aliens, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen. Actually, I think
it won't happen until we have a little bit more peace here between the United States, Russia, North Korea, and China. All four of these countries vying for some type of superpower, super authority, super weaponry, super control, right? And so an extraterrestrial race that's good intended isn't going to come to a world of division. It's not because now they're taking sides. I mean, China's a communist country. America, well, up until recently, was a free country. Some of those freedoms have been infringed upon, and that might be changing as we're sliding down that slippery slope of leftism.
Yeah.
But that aside, it's very apparent to a lot of researchers who saw this happening, saw the bigger picture that this was a possibility. But yeah, so really get a hard disclosure, having extraterrestrials come and say, okay, look, yeah, we're here. We've been here. And this is what we're doing. If they do that here, then, you know, they might get China all in an uproar. Maybe another extraterrestrial will come and make themselves apparent to the Chinese or to the North Koreans or to Russia. And so we have to move through that.
I have a question for you, Laurie, because I've asked this before, and I want to get your opinion on this. Okay, what do you think would happen? Let's say that we're at a place in the world where everybody knows and believes that extraterrestrials are real and they're visiting the planet. Okay, right now that's not what's happening. Let's say it's no question, the government, everybody accepts it. Do you think the others will act differently? How will their behavior change if all of us believe that they're real? Will there be a change?
Well, what you're talking about is us moving through what was considered the age of confluence. The population of the Earth right now is 7.6825 billion people, I believe. You might want to check that. But when we get to 10 billion, this is a critical point in the consciousness expansion and the ascension of the humans. Every time we get close to this, we screw up some way, although I don't want to be too hard on us because we're allowed as many chances as it takes, okay, as we're just simply evolving. And it's okay to fall down as long as you get back up and learn from your mistakes. And ultimately, I think that most humans are more good. And when it comes right down to it, that will begin to do the right thing. And upon that happening, see, the age of confluence has to align with mass disclosure, because then we'll be in a place of acceptance in a peaceful, empowered way. And remember, true empowerment means that you're capable of generating deep feelings of inner peace. You know, it's not this external state of, oh, I can do this, I can do that. That is not empowerment. Empowerment is generating deep feelings of calm, relaxed, peaceful feelings that you can move about and handle situations. It's like having equanimity, you know, being calm among the chaos, which is what people need to be practicing right now, because the age of confluence is exactly that. It's chaos. What you think should be happening, something else is happening. What looks like it should be up, all of a sudden is down. So it's confusion, but it's our time to sort of really rise up, to move through, to take a critical look at ourselves, the good, the bad, the indifferent, and simply embrace it. Just embrace it. And upon the embracing of the full self, the inner self relaxes. The inner dialogue relaxes. A sense of acceptance, both universally, cosmically, really becomes apparent. And this is when all of us people move as a whole. So it's two paths coming together as one as we move forward. And so two things have to happen. We've been here before, and we have all of these incredible leftover architectural buildings that go back millennium. And we see that there have been great civilizations. How we look at the pyramids, all of this has changed. We see now that it's highly probable that Giza was a power source, that the grid alignment, that where it's located, I'm sure you're familiar with the grid of energy under the earth, in alignment with Orion is where the Giza is. It's pulling both cosmic and Terra energy, and it created like a Wi-Fi energy system for some ancient civilizations. Even our ancient knowledge of Egypt, they didn't know where the pyramids came from. Everything was just speculation even to them, because that was a civilization that existed. They had electricity. The obelisks were very much like an antenna. So you see they were capped in both silver and gold, conducting energy. Yeah, it's very interesting.
But so you basically think that they're here now to upgrade the human civilization?
Listen, nobody's going to save us but ourselves. That's the only way it should be. A true extraterrestrial race. Like I've learned so much from them, but they never gave me anything. Everything I learned, I had to learn the emotional work by learning who I was, what I am, and why basically I'm here. But aren't those the major philosophical questions that man has pondered for 2,000 years? What am I? Why am I here? What's it all about? But as we actually now can answer these questions, and the biggest one being, what we are, that light embodied being, the implication of the multidimensionality of the soul. Look at people out of body experiences. I've had so many. They used to scare me. I mean, I couldn't even meditate, and I'm 41 years now a meditator. And every time I would relax, right out of my body, I would come, walk right around, see myself, and I used to think, how far can I go? What is happening here? And then I learned. What I learned was that I was still Laurie, with or without a body, that I maintained my consciousness, but I was fluid, like light years between your eyes. You can expand and move. This is what we can do. This is what we've always been able to do. That is why they called us humans.
I have another question for you, and we're going to be wrapping up here pretty soon, but I have another question for you, and it's actually regarding my wife and I. As far as she knows, she has never been abducted, but she does have some strange memories from her past. Kimberly was mentioning earlier that a lot of abductees, in fact, a good majority of them, have been taken since they were children, and it usually starts when they're around 4 or 5 years old. Now, flash forward to the memory that I have. When I was on the operation table and the alien put her hand on my head, right after she did that, she stuck something into my neck, and I believe it was a chip. I don't believe that these chips are used for tracking purposes. I believe that they are there to communicate with us or to help us. Now, flash forward again to last week. I woke up in the morning and I told my wife, my neck is just killing me today. And I don't know, I must have slept wrong. And she said, mine is too. And I mean, that's a little too much of a coincidence that we would both wake up with our necks in pain.
78% of abductees have neck pain.
Yeah. But
for a good
check
reason.
Check this out. Hers, I don't know if you can see this.
I can.
But it's all swollen up now, Mine isn't. But like I said, I can feel it. But I wonder if they were doing some sort of, I have a memory that I recently had about my mother and I walking past a cow field. Now, why we would be doing this, I haven't the slightest idea, because it would, my mother was the type of person who, walking past a cow field would be beneath her. She was a businesswoman but I was like 10 years old, and I saw something over the field, and it was a silver disc. And I remember looking at that and then looking at my mom and saying, what is that? And she says, don't worry about it. And she took my hand and we walked away. It was just a flash memory like that. And it was triggered by a conversation I was having with another hypnotherapist. And so I think that, first of all, Kimberly is right that a lot of children are abducted at a young age, and they are repeatedly abducted. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason that they're repeatedly abducted is because they're, I don't know, upgrading us.
Well,
I don't know.
Some of them are put into school, and they begin to learn how to work with the energy of the bodies For instance, some children report learning how to triangulate the palm chakras with the third eye, and the entities would like throw what looked like a disc into the air, and the kids would have to practice holding it so that it hovered.
Uh-huh.
And so depending on your skill ability, whether you're what you're able to do best, you know, that you'll be put into a different school. Part of the problem, though, with taking children is some of the information that they tell them, stuff like we're your real parents. Again, planting that seed into a child, you know, that maybe they just don't belong, just burns me. I'm going to tell you that. I would never do that to a child. I just, you know, there's a way to go about this, and they're just not really doing it. But yeah, the children, it's been a big deal. I've talked to hundreds of children who have been taken off planet or into what feels like a mountain, into different forms of laboratory where they're tested. Children describing what can only be decontamination rooms, seeing both humans and non-humans, and you know, the kids that it does make them more comfortable though with the idea and less reactive.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, I have to ask you a question about the children that are claiming that the aliens are their parents. Is it possible that they were implanted into a human and they really aren't? They really are their parents, the aliens?
Well, there are many people on the planet right now that chose a particular vessel to get here, to be here during this age of confluence, and not necessarily because they were going to get the best parents, but primarily just to get here. And they may have suffered a lot in their childhood, and each one of those things that set them apart or ostracized them in any way was only because there was a certain power that believed that they could overcome this and learn and eventually move into it. So one of the agendas that we do hear about is the integration of the hybrids into our regular life here, that you might notice some global warming, terraforming, creating an environment that's more appropriate for them. Of course, right now we are at the end of an ice age. I don't know why nobody says that when they talk about global warming. We're at the tail end of the last ice age. One would expect warming, as has always been the case. We heat up, cool off, and this is the nature of Gaia. Nothing to fear.
Everything's reset.
Yeah, but you know, the neck thing, I'm very intrigued. About 2 weeks ago, I set up a new camera system in my house, and we experimented, put the camera in the bedroom, and how it works is if there's an unusual motion, it takes a still picture, sends it to your email, and the alarm goes off. Okay, so our alarm goes off, picture goes to the email, they take a picture of our bed. My husband and I, no.
Excuse me.
That's a very strange phenomena that we're trying to wrap our minds around. But yeah, our camera took a picture of an empty bed, and we should have both been in bed sleeping at the time. Shows nothing but a ball of light over
That's
my
very
phone.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
And my husband, not an experiencer, although he has seen UFOs because he's been on multiple sky watches. I do sometimes wonder if they don't take a couple and sometimes entire families. And we do look for physical marks. If you want to know about that implant, try getting a high-powered magnet and placing it wherever you feel that implant is on your neck and see if you can move it. I have from UC Med Center the MRIs of an experiencer who has what looks like an implant in the pineal gland. There's no entry, there's no exit, there's no shrapnel. We don't know what it is. There are 2 other implants on his thighs. They seem to be moving towards each other. And like have his permission to film them, which I did. And I kind of corralled them with my hands. And when I tried to corral the implant, it retreated. It moved away. Sure, I could have moved the lymphatic system in the fluid, could have moved it. There's always that possibility. But I am the president of a nonprofit organization called Opus. It's the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support. We offer a 24-hour free online support group at opusnetwork.org. We have a board of contributors, Linda Moulton Howe, Dan Aykroyd, a list of other people who are also experiencers. On the board, our members are therapists like myself, doctors, lawyers. And so we offer every avenue of support. And so we're really at a place right now where the paranormal and the extraterrestrial worlds are blending together. And it's like somebody's like running up the blinds. We're beginning to see all these things coming through that might not have been apparent before. And you know what? That's a good thing. That's called growth.
Yeah. I would love to talk to Dan Aykroyd one of these days, because he's got a very, very interesting story to tell.
Another Canadian like myself.
There you go. Kimberly, I'm sorry to interrupt you. What were you going to say?
She said something about using a magnet, but not all of the implants are magnetic.
No, but that's one way to look at it. There are other ways. MRI is really the best route. That's what I would recommend to people. That's what we did with this experiencer. And because I'm the president of Opus, upon his demise, he's allowed me to take possession of the implants as they are removed post-mortem. So we're looking forward to that on one hand and not on the other, obviously. Okay. Yeah, implants, there are different types. They're energetic, but it depends who put them there and what they're being used for. Some are simply consciousness monitors, and some are actual tracking devices. And some can control your behavior. Some emit a radio signal. We've also detected that. A radio signal, that means it's programmable.
So, Laurie, we are going to get out of here for the night. However, viewers, like I said, we had earlier in the show, we have a Patreon page, and there's a link to that in the description. And Laurie has been kind enough to join us for that tonight, and that's going to be happening in about 20 minutes.
Send money.
What's that?
I said send money.
Yeah, and so like I said, it only costs $5 a month, and for that you get all kinds of extra content, behind the scenes kind of stuff here. But in the meantime, before we go, Laurie, where can people contact you?
You can contact me through opusnetwork.org. You can contact me at truehypnotherapy.com. Also, just want to plug, we got a show airing April 30th. I regressed Demi Lovato live on TV as she experienced a non-human entity contact. Be sure to tune into that on Peacock.
Great.
Sounds
fantastic.
interesting.
Viewers, thanks a lot for watching. And as always, until next time, keep thinking and question everything.